7-win type teams. I can't wait to let 18 to 22-year-olds emotionally ruin me.
I made a call, to Vegas. I said, look, we actually need the favorite here.
Welcome in, everyone. Bear Bets Pod, Bruce the Bear, soon to be joined by Sammy P, getting ready for another weekend of college football, third week of the college football playoff rankings out. And Bruce, the big game of the week up in at Austin Stadium in Eugene, only ranked matchup of the week, Oregon taking on SC. What are we expecting out of SC this week? Because it feels like it's kind of been there, done that, and Oregon looking to justify their college football playoff rank.
Yeah, it feels like it's been kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back with Lincoln Riley's team this year. I feel like locally, not a lot of people expected much from this Trojans team, maybe 7-5, and here they are looking at a possible 10-2 season, maybe, playing their way into a playoff spot. I think offensively, Jaden Maiava's played really good. The run game, they're on their, third string running back, King Miller, has been fantastic for them. To see how they run the football, been really good at home. They're coming off a nice comeback win in bad conditions and pouring rain against a tough Iowa team. Mekhi Lemon has been phenomenal. I don't think he can win the Heisman, but he has been like such a go-to tone setter, playmaker. Defense has been a little better than it was before. It hadn't been great, but here's the issue, Bear, I think. How does this team travel? They didn't travel. They didn't play well on the road against Illinois. They obviously didn't hold up well against a really physical team who could run the football in South Bend. The Irish ran for over 300 yards. Now you got the Ducks, who are like the Big Ten's most dynamic running offense, and it's at a tough place to play. You and I have spent a lot of time at Austin Stadium and know it's not easy to go there on the road. What is the actual track record of Lincoln as going on the road in tough environments in these kind of games?
It's been terrible. And like I said, what reason is there to believe that this ultimately is going to change? I mean, they've lost 8 straight games on the road as an underdog, 0-5 under Lincoln Riley. And as a program, last 21 times they've been a road underdog. They pulled just 2 outright upsets. So they don't typically win these games. They don't even typically cover them. They're 5-16 against the number in that span. And hearing injury concerns on the offensive line, injury concerns on the defensive side of the ball. Oregon still don't know for sure, but there were rumblings that Evan Stewart might be back for this game, if not certainly potentially for the playoff. It feels like a good spot to bet Oregon. I just want to ask your opinion on the Ducks, Bruce, because we hear so many people saying, like, if they lose, are they out of the playoff? Who is Oregon beaten? And Hunter Yurachek was talking. One of the many contradictions that he let out of his mouth the other on Tuesday night was, Oregon did beat Penn State, and I know Penn State has fallen, but it was still a really good win. So, they're still getting a bump for that. They won at Iowa, but the wins as a whole aren't necessarily there. But you look at the dominance over Power 4 teams, you look at their efficiency ratings being top 5 offense, defense. Where are you in terms of Oregon as a national title type contender?
I would have thought 10-2 in the Big Ten would be good enough to make the playoff. But given the SEC may get 5 in, the SEC potentially could get, 6 in. I just think this feels like a play-in game. You lose to USC, and I think the narrative is going to change fast about Oregon, right? They lost it. They only had, one offensive touchdown against Indiana, lose at home to Indiana, lose at home to Oregon. You don't have a great schedule otherwise. The good win of Penn State, Hunter Yurachek said a lot of nonsense the other night. I mean, he was like double talk all over the place. And it's a 4-6 team. It's not a team that's like, oh, they're a top 15 team. It's not like Penn State, that same team, turned around and lost to a winless UCLA team. They lost at home to a really mediocre Northwestern team that continued to sputter. I don't think you can spin that much more. I just think what happens with the narrative is, I think Oregon's going to win this game. I think most people do. If they don't, I think it's going to say a lot about USC, but I think people would read a lot into it as it's going to say a lot about Oregon. And, I'll believe it when I see it. But if they lose this game, I don't think they're going to have much of an argument to say at 10-2, even if they beat a Washington team that, has been okay, but it was a team that got whipped at home by Ohio State and got beat by Michigan. And, it's not, I just don't think they're going to have enough depth to their schedule. I mean, whatever Hunter Yurchek's talking about, like quality losses, you better have some really good wins too.
More on that later. If SC does go 9-3, do you think there's a chance Lincoln Riley may move on from SC?
Man, I think there's a lot of USC people would love it if they got out from under that contract that the old regime gave them. But I don't know where he would go, Bear. Everything I've always heard is Lincoln's family really loves it out here in Southern California. He's got a really good recruiting class coming in. This is, even if it's a 9-3, especially if they don't get blown out at Autzen, I think they can build off this year and try to take a step forward. They have some good young players in the program. So at least on that part, I'm like, okay, it's not a 7-5 season. If they lose this week and then somehow lose to a bad UCLA team, I think that'd be a different story. I just don't know where Lincoln would go. Like the Baylor job isn't coming open this year. They already announced that Dave Aranda's coming back for another year. I just don't see a landing spot that I'm like, oh yeah, I could see him going there. Nothing seems to be like as ideal considering of what he has and what his family situation is right now. I think that he's like, all right, I'm here. This is home. Let me try to keep building it. I like some of the changes that the new regime has made for me. So that's my gut on it.
One place where a job could become open is Como, Missouri. Eli Drinkwitz certainly been mentioned for Penn State, been mentioned for Florida, been mentioned for any of the big name jobs, and deservedly so. They might get Bo Prabula back this week, we think, against Oklahoma, coming off that win in Tuscaloosa last week.
Yeah, I think there's a real shot of that. I mean, look, there's a lot of smoke around Eli Drinkwitz in a bunch of jobs. There was some interest also at Auburn. There's definitely some interest at Florida. If Lane Kiffin does end up leaving Ole Miss to go to LSU, or I guess he could go to Florida. I mean, from what I'd heard of the end of this week, felt like strong feelings that it might be Baton Rouge. But, where does that leave Eli? I don't know. He's done a really good job there. We know he knows how to run the football. It's interesting because this matchup is it's not like they're a playoff contender at this point, but I feel like for a third string quarterback, or you got Prabula back, we know Ahmad Hardy's going to run it down people's throats if he's in the lineup for sure. So it's just like, they're an interesting team that's kind of below the radar to some extent, where their head coach is all over the radar.
And their defensive front is really good. We've seen a lot of movement in this game, now south of 7 points. Oklahoma is an interesting team because you look at OU, offensively, they're the only team in the college football playoff top 15 that has an offensive efficiency rating worse than 30th. They have really struggled offensively, and Alabama basically just gave them the game last week. OU was dominated in the box score outside. Alabama turns it over 3 times, missed a field goal, the long pick six, another turnover set up a short field for a field goal. Like OU feels like they could be on upset alert this week, but now knowing that this number is down to 6.5, I don't know if I can pull the trigger on Missouri plus a 6.5. And if you look at the playoff rankings compared to like the power ratings, like Oklahoma is one of the more overrated teams out there. Like most power ratings have them like the 12, 13 range. CFP's got them 8th. Well, that's like that's the difference in how you look at just like raw power ratings and then factor in wins and just kind of looking at a team and a resume.
They feel a little bit like Stoops' national title team, where you're like, you kind of taking them for granted for some extent. They're better on defense than they are on offense. When Mateer is healthy and 100%, like you see some flashes. When he came back for the Texas game, they did not look good at all. He hadn't practiced in like 3 weeks, so it's kind of understandable that they would be suspect. Yeah, I know. It's just like they're that team that I feel like you have to, if you're a CFP member, you have to be like, all right, they have a legit resume because they played a tough schedule. They have a good defense. I mean, credit to them for forcing some turnovers. One of those 4 turnovers last week, their left defensive end just whipped the right tackle and forced a fumble from Ty Simpson. That was obviously a huge play. So I don't know. I don't want to write them off because I wrote them off before, and they find ways to win.
Speaking of finding ways to win, Florida nearly found a way to win in Oxford last week after we talked about the ridiculous line movement. Tennessee hasn't won in Gainesville since the Zook era. It's been a long time, losing a couple times as a favorite. Which side kind of wins the battle of the immovable force and irresistible object, whatever you want to call it, the terrible Florida offense against Power 4 teams or the terrible Tennessee defense overall?
Yeah, I mean, look, you're at the end of the season for the Gators. Lagway's been banged up. They have talent, they have good receivers, but those guys have been banged up, and we know that they have, like on their own kind of version of Ahmad Hardy to some extent in the backfield, who's just a physical punishing runner and ball. But I just feel like Tennessee, I don't want to say I feel like Tennessee has more to play for than them, but I feel like they do, right? Like, at least you have a coach who's still there. You're not on the interim status. I feel like it's just been a long stretch for the Gators for the last 2 years of up and down, trying to save the coach's job to some extent. And I just feel like Tennessee, I think they're in a little better place, but again, maybe they were a little fool's gold earlier in the year. You look at how this schedule's gone, it's almost like they're in a role where it's like, all right, next week, can they play spoiler against Little Vandy and make sure that they don't make the playoff at their expense? So just a really interesting kind of subplot to all this is just like who's still in the game kind of thing.
Yeah, it is. And there's certainly, I think, more teams still kind of in the game, knowing that you have an expanded college football playoff. Speaking of the college football playoff, Bruce, let's get to the elephant in the room. Let's talk about Tuesday night. Certainly, when I don't want to make this a Miami Notre Dame debate because it really isn't just Miami Notre Dame. Miami, big favorite in Virginia Tech. I think their offense is going to go up there, put up a big number, score up a bunch of points, and win. I was just shocked that Alabama fell below Notre Dame. And the most concerning part was what Hunter Yurchik was talking about how when you compare Miami and Notre Dame, you're comparing the losses. Like, what are we doing? And the two teams played. Like, I get that you want these big non-conference games to be played and you want these big games to matter and you don't want to penalize a team for losing one of these games. I get that. But to make to give the team that lost the game the reward and like the team that won, it's irrelevant. Like, what are we doing here? We're never going to see these games played again if this is the road they continue down.
Yeah, I argue with some of my buddies who are also, college football media as well about this, because the biggest thing to me is if we have so few opportunities, it's the sport with the smallest sample size, and you have to do a lot of projecting because of that. If this team plays that, and it's all this transitive nature and this transitive kind of BS that goes with it. But the reality is, Miami and Notre Dame actually played. Miami and Notre Dame actually have the exact same record. The stupid part of this, of all the stupid pieces, is that
which stupid part are you going to talk about? Because there are a hell of a lot of them.
I'm going to talk about the stupid excuse thing they have where, and we both have probably done the CFP mock experience, but it's like, oh, if we don't consider these two teams similar, we don't factor into the head-to-head. So we created this like big gap between the two teams. Well, if you don't think Miami and Notre Dame are that similar, what were you doing for the first week of the season? Were you just on vacation in Europe? Did you not see that game? It counted. It happened. And the reality of it is, if you throw that game out, like, it's not like Notre Dame has beaten a bunch of top 10 teams. They haven't. Their best win is at home against USC. It's at home against USC. They didn't beat Ohio State in Columbus. It's like, what are we doing here? And then the part that that bugs me more than anything on this is you want to talk about FPI, you want to talk about S+, you want to talk about Sager and all those things or whatever. You can talk about them fine. But to me, they don't factor in if the first thing is same record head to head. because the other stuff is predictive and it's projecting. That stuff happened. And if we get into a sport where what actually happened on the field is thrown out, is because that's what you're doing in this case. If it's thrown out, I don't want to hear because I commented off of what you said on social media, pointing out the foolishness of Hunter Yurichek's comment. And I had a few Notre Dame fans like pushing back. They're like, well, if they played today, you know what? If they played today, great. Who knows?
Let's watch them play today.
What would happen. Nobody knows what would happen. You know what we do know? We know what actually did happen, right? And so we're already talking like the only thing I get worked up about is when people want to devalue the college football regular season even more. And that's what's happening here. Like, look, if all of a sudden people are like, oh yeah, and Miami's losses are to a terrible SMU team and a terrible Louisville team. Sorry, they're not terrible teams. Boston College, that's a terrible team. Like you want to talk about how teams fall off or not? Louisville, when they played Miami, had one of the 3 or 4 best running backs in the country. He's missed the last 2 games, Isaac Brown. By the way, Miami, when they played Notre Dame, they're the only ones who really totally shut down Jeremiah Love. He averaged 3 yards of carries. Yeah. So that's what gets me worked up.
It's me. You mentioned SMU Louisville, by the way. They're playing. People are playing, SMU and Louisville are terrible losses. They're top 30 power ranked teams. And that's the top quarter of college football. And by the way, they're playing this week. One of them is going to win and be 8-3 and ranked next week. So all of a sudden it goes from being a terrible loss to a good loss now because they're now ranked. It just shows you the ridiculousness of what some people goes through these people's minds. And somehow Alabama with their 4 top 25 wins isn't ahead of Notre Dame, who's got the 1, because Notre Dame's got the 2 close losses, and Alabama lost to Florida State, who I think is still power rated like a top 35, 40 college football team. So that loss week 1 counts against Alabama, but the week 1 loss for Notre Dame doesn't count against them, against Miami. It's just like a web of absolute contradictions. And as a Miami alum, I think there's no guarantee they're going to win Saturday in Blacksburg. There's no guarantee they're going to win Saturday in Pittsburgh. They've lost these types of games before. So nothing is set in stone. We know Notre Dame they'll beat Stanford, they'll beat Syracuse, and they're going to be 10-2. Both of them should be in the playoff. And I think the real, to steal a line from my colleague Tim Brando, the fly in the ointment, as they always like to talk about in the BCS era, are those 2 Big 12 teams ranked 10th and 11th, or 11th and 12th, rather. BYU, who's got the 1 comeback win on their home field against Utah. I mentioned Oklahoma being viewed as overrated from the power ratings. Like if you look at BYU, they're 11th in the college football playoff rankings. They're like 21, 23, 18 in terms of power ratings. So like they're like seen as a pretender. And then you got Utah, Bruce, who you beat Arizona State when Jeff Sims played. You got blown out on your home field by Texas Tech when Will Hammond played. And you blew a lead at BYU. Like, what has Utah done to deserve to be ranked ahead of Miami and maybe even Vanderbilt?
Yeah, and I think why they might be there. And again, this is what you're left with like conspiracy theories when you have such like kind of a wild process that this is. But if you slide Utah in there and you put Alabama behind Notre Dame, now you have the wedge to go, oh, we don't have to address the head-to-head now. Now, if you got Utah behind them, because like you said, they have Arizona State's 25th. They're just hanging by a thread there. As you said, it was Jeff Sims that they beat. It was not Levitt's team. And that's a big difference. So if you took Utah below them, because they did get whipped by the backup quarterback at their own place, if they're behind them, and Alabama's in front of them, now you absolutely, by their own definition, have to match up Miami and Notre Dame. And I think it's a lot harder for the committee to justify throwing out a head-to-head, again, because of what Notre Dame's schedule is. I mean, they played, I think, 5 of the worst defenses in college football. It's not like this gauntlet. So I don't know. It just is what it is.
What I'm trying to remember, you've done the mock, I've done the mock in the past, and I remember, like, you take it from the top, and you take like a group of like 8 teams or whatever, and then you like break it down by 3 and take the rest, and then you add like, I don't know how nobody at the start of the process can like call up a comparison between Miami and Notre Dame to get this process started. Like that's what I'm like. Maybe the procedure changed when they went to a 12-team playoff. I don't know, but I don't know why like they're not considered in the same bracket now. I thought you could compare any teams you wanted at any time.
Bear, the one thing I've always maintained about this process is these guys are making it up as they go along. That's exactly what has always happened. And I think just the fact that we're not the only ones who've talked about this a lot. Like, people have talked about it since the first rating show when there was a huge gap between the two. And the fact, I feel like Reese Davis, who's really the first person who gets to ask them about the process, he's brought it up. So the fact that that's the thing that everybody's talked about for like the last month inside the sport, the fact that they're constantly asked about it, you would think they have their head in the sand or someplace else if they're not doing that exercise to be like, all right, maybe we got to like have a better criteria to explain why these teams who played each other and have the exact same record and have a bunch of are going to end up with a handful of common opponents, why that is the way it is.
And we'll find out. As you and I both know, we've been loving, living, and covering the sport for a long time. We know things are going to happen, and maybe something could happen Saturday night here at historic Nippert Stadium, where BYU is a 2.5-point favorite over Cincinnati. It's a Cincinnati defense. I have to say Cincinnati in honor of my former colleague and lifelong friend, Kirk Herbstreit, who always calls it Cincinnati. Bearcats defense is terrible. They have a hard time getting teams off the field. And I know BYU has not been aesthetically pleasing, but all they do is win these types of games, Bruce. So joining the Big 12, they're 16-1 straight up when they're favored. So like people always like to try and knock them off and think the underdog is live to win. And it's only happened once. And I just don't know what to expect. I mean, there was a time when Brandon Sorsby and that offense was humming and looking really well, but it does not look like the same Cincinnati team in the last couple of weeks.
No, it doesn't. They have sputtered down the stretch. You watch them. They had the lead against Arizona last week at home. I don't want to say they found a way to lose because that's not giving Arizona credit. I mean, I feel like Noah Fifita played really well and their offensive line played well. But as you said, like they have good players on defense. I don't know why they have struggled as much as they have. And on the BYU side, I mean, credit to Kalani Sitake. His teams are always physical. And it feels like he's got like the Tim Tebow of the Big 12 and Bear Bachmeier. It fits. I wouldn't bet against them here just from like the pulse of both teams. It just feels like this other team is just kind of rolling where it feels like Cincinnati's limping to the finish line. All right, Bear, let's bring in our favorite guy, our favorite go-to guy, Sammy P for the walkthrough. Sammy P, what are the sports books saying right now about those BYU Cougars?
Well, they're betting BYU, the public, like they have Sunday's paper, Bruce. And one bookmaker in Vegas, Tony Miller at the Golden Nuggets, said for every 10 bets we write on this game, 9 are on the Cougars, which is not really a surprise. BYU has a chance to play in the playoff. But when you see a 9 out of 10 ticket count, it makes you wonder, Bear, why is the line not from 2.5 to 3? And Tony said, you know why. So we have a nice debate here between the public and the sharps. The public is on BYU at 90% at the Golden Nugget. Wise guys, though, waiting to take that 3 with Cincinnati.
And I normally would love to be taking the 2.5-point home dog here because, as Tony said, you know why. The you know why is go ahead, bet the favorite at less than a field goal if it looks so short, and you know ultimately what's going to happen. But I felt this way about BYU like all year long, that their lines have kind of been short. I mean, I bet against them against Colorado, came back and won. Bet Arizona, ridiculous comeback and win. Iowa State, the line was short. Like all year long, these lines have been short with BYU, and all they do is keep winning. So I'm staying far away. My money is staying in my pocket here.
Okay, speaking of money in the pocket, Sammy P, you just heard about a big bet that has been placed on an SEC team to win the title. What's the scoop there?
It is on the Georgia Bulldogs. One bookmaker in Vegas said somebody walked up to the counter with $10,000 and bet on the Georgia Bulldogs at 10-1. That's a nice bark there, Bear. 10,000 to win 100,000. Somebody believes in UGA.
I believe in him too, Bruce and Sammy. People have been asking me, if not Ohio State, who? I think Georgia is super live. Everything that happened to the Bulldogs earlier in the year, with the loss, to the close calls, the injuries, the comebacks. Bruce, the last 2 weeks, they have played their two best games of the year, on the road in Starkville and then against Texas. I think all the adversity early on has made them better. You look at the playoff bracket right now, maybe they're going to be the 4 seed, maybe they're going to be the 5 seed, but you could very easily be looking at a Georgia-Ohio State semifinal, which would be absolutely ridiculous. A couple of years ago, remember, we basically had that Georgia-Ohio State semifinal in the year that Bulldogs won the national championship, blowing out TCU. But yeah, if I had to pick one team outside of Ohio State right now, I think I would go Georgia.
Yeah, they're dangerous right now, as you said. The last couple of weeks, they look like they're rolling. A spy in Athens that you and I both kind of talk to from time to time has pointed out this was a really young team with a lot of freshmen. And it's like there's a bunch of dudes who was like, they're going to be on your freaks list in a year or so from now. They're starting to play more. Obviously, Gunnar Stockton has played well. The run game has gotten cranked up. Feels like the defense, it's not like they have the same kind of pass rushers. But Texas didn't have a prayer again of running the football against them. So there looks like Kirby's flexing his muscle, and he definitely has done a bunch of flexing on it on social media after that too. So interesting times in Athens. Maybe we do have a powerhouse that's not the Aggies in the SEC.
Ironically, Sammy, when did this all come into play? A couple
Thursday
of games.
Night.
Couple of games that Georgia has played after Kirby came on the Bear Bets podcast.
You meant when did Georgia round into form, not when did the bet happen? Yes.
Exactly.
I would also like to update, Bruce, that every guest that's come on Bear Bets this year has won. Dan Lanning was on the show this week.
Who was the guest this Dan Lanning? So that means bad news for Lincoln and Leinert's Trojans, I would think.
Exactly.
Although I think we all kind of think that way. Michigan State and Iowa, not exactly going to feel like Mahomes Mayfield, Sammy P. What's the latest on the QB situation in this game?
So Childs is out for Michigan State. I have that on good accord. He's not going to play. Now, Iowa is preparing. I want to get this name right here. Alessio Milivojevic. Say that 8 times fast. That's a Serbian last name and an Italian first name. They're preparing for Milivojevic, but it sounds like it's 50-50. They're calling him questionable right now. Iowa is doing its diligence, watching old high school tape on true freshman Leo Hannon. They're preparing for Milivojevic, but Barrett might be a freshman quarterback on the road behind that very, very bad offensive line.
And I had Penn State last week against Michigan State, basically on the assumption that this was not a Michigan State offense that was going to score very many points at all. If they're down to their third string quarterback against an Iowa team that I think would load, I mean, they already shut out Wisconsin this year. I think points would be very, very hard to come by. And it's just a question you'd have with Iowa. Are they going to be able to just get back up after difficult consecutive losses? I think they can.
Plus, they got the defense, and I think when you team like feels like a wounded animal with Michigan State, but a wounded one that doesn't have a lot of fight in itself left. Let's get to the 2-minute drill, guys. Bear, as we're looking at some of these teams kind of getting closer to the finish line, obviously there's a huge game next week in Ann Arbor. You'll be at it. Ohio State trying to finally beat the Wolverines. But this week, the Wolverines are actually a big favorite at Maryland. Obviously, Mike Locksley has got more time. They've announced he's going to have next year. He's got a really good freshman class, including that will also expected to have one of the top 5 recruits in the country who's committed to the Terps, expected to get there. The Terps have not looked good down the stretch, though. What are the betting trends telling you right now about this matchup, Bear?
Well, we saw this trend last week, and this historical note with Michigan in the game at Wrigley, where Michigan needed the late field goal to win. Last 13 games, the Wolverines have been a double-digit favorite. They're 3-10 against the number. However, it's 40 straight wins as a double-digit favorite dating back to 2020. And if you take 2020 out, Michigan has won 58 straight games as a double-digit favorite dating back to 2017. So I think Michigan will win the game. I think they are going to be shorthanded at running back. Obviously, Justice Haynes out. I don't think Brendan Marshall is going to play either. So we may be down to a third string running back. But I think Maryland is going to have a hard time with that Michigan defense. I'd be surprised if that 58-game winning streak, which, by the way, was the NCAA record home winning streak of Miami, that came to an end.
Just one quick note on this one from me. Wise Guys did lay it with Michigan, but they laid smaller numbers, Bruce. They laid 12 and 13. Now we're at 14 basically everywhere. Wise Guys were very, very happy to lay anything south of 2 touchdowns.
All right. Sammy P, we're in this almost Thanksgiving stage of the year. And I think for Bear, and like a lot of us, it's you get sort of nostalgic. Bear, there's a bunch of matchups that are not, they're not like playoff implications in terms of in the CFP, but they're good rivalry games. I feel like these are old school Beano Cook kind of games that would get talked about. What are the ones who are catching your eye for this weekend?
The game, 150th anniversary of the game, Harvard, Yale, Ivy League undefeated winner gets the Ivy League title, goes to the first Ivy League postseason berth ever. Unbelievable. That wasn't bad. I think I got through that okay, but you're right.
I don't think you could sustain the whole thing.
No, I definitely couldn't. I wasn't going to go into Lehigh Lafayette in full Beano. But yeah, how cool is it? Harvard, Yale, a berth in the playoff at line, Ivy League title at the line, 150th anniversary of the game. It's a great story, and it's why this sport is beloved by so many people. You got Lehigh Lafayette, both are undefeated in the Patriot League. A winner gets the Ivy League title, a great rivalry. Montana State, brawl the wild, 2 versus 3 in the country. Montana's undefeated right behind North Dakota State, the Bison. I can recall being at the Brawl of the Wild a couple of years ago back in Bozeman, and it was the coldest I have ever been on a college football pregame show set. My computer froze and broke a half hour before the show started. The generators all failed, and there was no power to the set. So it was an unbelievable time. It was an unbelievable memory, and it was an unbelievable scene between the fans of Montana and Montana State. Games like this and shows like that really just kind of give you pause, make you think, take a step back and be like, you know what, we're doing this for all the right reasons. So just three games that probably aren't going to be at the forefront of your television monitors on Saturday, but they're big deals to the fans of all 3 of those teams.
Believe it or not, I actually have something on this. I was texting with Matoy Pearson, who's a great FCS
all right,
mind.
Mo.
He works over at Wynn Resorts, and I trust him more than anybody in terms of making the FCS numbers. He's got 2 bullets for you, Bear. He said, if you're looking for a bet to win the whole enchilada, number 1 is Mercer, who I know you like this weekend against Auburn. Number 2 is Montana State. He likes those 2 in the FCS.
Ooh, so you'll going against the heavy favorite Bison. Interesting. I'm glad you mentioned Mercer, because the Bears are, ironically, the Mercer Bears. I like them this week. Some places haven't posted numbers yet because it's an added game, but I found a 28. There's some 27.5s out there. Mercer, if you look at, and to go along with what Mo was saying, they're ranked 30-somewhat spots higher in the Sagarin rating than South Alabama. And South Alabama is a team that Auburn played earlier this year, and it was a 2-score game. Auburn has the Iron Bowl next week against Alabama. Mercer puts up a bunch of points. Perfect college football this year, Bruce, would be Mercer going to Jordan-Hare, looking at like a 24-14 type ugly game, comfortable cover for the dog. Auburn wins, doesn't look great. And then what happens when the Tide come calling up to the Barners next week? Auburn winds up pulling the upset. That is like everything that college football 2025 is about.
Don't sleep on the Mercer Bears. Mike Jacobs, the coach there, rising star. I think some FBS programs have looked at him. He's a Jim Tressel protege, former Ohio State player. We could make this show a lot longer if we end up talking too much about FCS, but I'm okay with that.
I was going to say, I did not expect more than one comment on Mercer football, but I love it. And now you listen to Bruce and the Bear all the way through. You never know what we're just not big conference snobs. We're getting to the nitty gritty with all this stuff as well. Sammy, Bruce, as always, fun to break it down with you. We'll do it again next Friday. Have a great Thanksgiving. Everyone else say have a great Thanksgiving. We'll talk to you a couple times more before then. Thanks again for watching YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you podcast. Remember, less you bet, more you lose when you win.